It's my pleasure right now to introduce David Porter. David is the project manager for the Task Force on Flexible Education at Simon Fraser University, my old alma mater, in BC. He's a former executive director of BC Campus, where he is a forceful advocate for the use of open educational resources, OERs, including the implementation of Canada's first scale government-funded open textbook program, starting in 2012 to 2014. He is also adjunct professor in the Master of Educational Technology program at the University of British Columbia. Please join me in welcoming David to the stage. Thank you. And for those of you who tweet, the tweeting address is there on the boards, and you can follow along or contribute. Thank you.
Hashtag.
Hashtag. I don't do tweeting, as you can tell. Hashtag. Thank you, David.
Thanks, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. I want to talk about engaging faculty in the use of open educational resources. It is the single biggest challenge to innovation is convincing faculty that to take a leap or step in a new direction will be beneficial to them personally and professionally, and in particular, of benefit to their students. And so I want to talk about what we're calling Beyond Free. Even though the open education resource movement is predicated on the notion of providing free and open access to resources, there have to be value propositions that move beyond simply free. And we like to talk to our faculty a lot about those value propositions as part of the process of bringing them aboard, doing things in new ways and in ways that they may not have contemplated as valuable in past times. I see. So why open? One of the ways that we've approached this challenge is to talk in terms of cultural change as an aspect of open education. That open is simply not an economical initiative, something that allows the resources and the products of the education process to be more freely available, but there's also a cultural imperative afoot here as well. And so providing examples of how open really has been part of our education system for a number of years is one of the places where we started. In the post-war era, the notion of providing free access to education was one of the fundamental tenets that the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights intended to sort of inculcate in society, that education should be free. And that notion continues to move forward. And in 2012 in Paris at the UNESCO OER Summit, one of the declarations that was made was a very simple concept, and it went something like this. If a public body, a government, invests in educational resources, those should be free to all citizens. And that notion of providing free access to a resource investment by government is something that should be universal. And many of the countries who attended the Paris OER Declaration firmly believed that principle and have pushed very hard for it. Many African countries were represented there, many European countries. The United States was a forceful presence at that particular conference, and has demonstrated over the past 2 years a $2 billion investment in materials for skills training, healthcare, and practical programs in the college system that are being built across the United States right now and being made available using a free and open license for resource use. In Canada, we have yet to be that bold. Our own government in British Columbia has tried very hard to push forward the notion across Canada through the Council of Ministers of Education that government investment in curricular resources should be openly accessible to all citizens. And it's that principle that I and my colleagues have been pushing forward for the past 3 or 4 years in British Columbia, and finally are getting some traction and success. The assumptions we're making are very straightforward. That we shouldn't be imposing restrictions on education materials, we should be making them accessible. That sharing is a fundamental part of the teaching practice. We want to share knowledge with our students. We want to expect them to share knowledge that they have gained through that process. We need to model that practice and principle completely. Collaboration is a good thing. So much of what happens in classrooms happens on an individual basis. Think about the power that is possible when things happen in a much more collective, cooperative, and collaborative manner. My colleague, David Wiley, who teaches at Brigham Young University in Utah, is a huge proponent of the notion of sharing and openness. And it is David who has been the primary spokesperson for the open education movement for the past 10 years. And he is an eloquent advocate for the notion of sharing as a fundamental principle of teaching and learning, and that in every way we need to find ways to demonstrate that principle. It happens well beyond the borders of education. There is a free culture movement worldwide in the arts, in the humanities, in music, in film, that are producing materials all the time and giving it away for free. It is part of an open culture. In 2012, the Dutch National Museum decided that it would take a bold step with its primary collection of resources, of paintings and images and artworks that were part of its permanent collection. They decided that they would freely license and make open the complete collection to anyone to do anything they wanted with it. You want to make t-shirts out of the images, you want to make mugs and sell them, go for it. Not a problem. They instituted an open licensing model that was completely open, which said, this is a public work owned by the citizens of the Netherlands. Take these works, take these images. If you want to use them commercially, go for it. If you want to use them in education, go for it. Very much a new way of thinking about providing cultural works to the masses. Open education resources are digital resources that are easy to replicate and easy to distribute. Making those resources more freely available is the primary focus of the open education movement. UNESCO has its own definition, and its definition has to do with the public domain and the public good, and the notion that if citizens and taxpayers have paid in some way for the development of educational materials, they should also get one. Pay for one, get one. Meaning, if it's already paid for by the taxpayers, everyone should have access. When you start to think this way, you can also then begin to start thinking beyond the notion of free. And how this plays out in education is in an interesting way. It allows educators, teachers, learners free access to manipulate educational resources in any way they want, legally. The notion is built upon a very simple principle. It's what Wiley calls the reusability paradox. For something to be really valuable as an educational entity, it needs to be contextualized. It can't be generic. It needs to be contextualized for your students, your subject, your situation. If you can't contextualize it, it loses value. It's not as easy to reuse and repurpose or re-engineer for your specific purpose. Take this image, for example. It could talk about the shark, and you could talk about this in a biological sense, about the attributes of this particular fish. Or it could talk about the ecosystem in which this animal exists. And this is a simple example of repurposing. But this repurposing could not have occurred unless I had complete and free access, not only to the image to legally change it, but also in an open technical format that allowed me to make the changes in a way that made it usable. And so unless you have free and open access to all of the resources available to you and can contextualize them for the situation you need, free isn't good enough. It needs to be open. There's a difference between free and open. Most of the resources we deal with in education are bounded by copyright in some way. And what people have been looking for many, many years is a simple way to do rights management in a way that benefits individuals, and in particular, educators. A simple, standardized way that requires little effort and, in fact, no real thought except the license tells me I can do what I want with this resource. And that is what Creative Commons has created through its licensing mechanism. Gone are the days when your intellectual property office has to write to publishers and ask for permission, or write to individuals and ask for permission, a very labor-intensive process. In the Creative Commons world, the rights afforded to you are embedded within the resource. You know what you can do with it. The four fundamental rights of openness and reuse are these: the right to reuse, the right to revise, the right to remix, and the right to redistribute. And more recently, pushed really by publishers' efforts to rent materials for fixed periods of time to students, is the right to retain. That once you have an open resource, you can keep it and do whatever you want with it in perpetuity. It's not a surprise that when students are offered the choice between electronic versions of materials and print versions of materials at low cost, they often opt for the print version. Why? Because it's easier to annotate and make notes in the margins. New technologies are allowing us to do that electronically, but they don't yet have the conviviality we need to make that happen. We're getting close, but it's not quite there yet. All of the rights expressed in open resources are really there for you to exploit in the way that you choose, in the way that makes the most sense for your students. Creative Commons licenses are extremely explicit. They're written in language that makes you look and see easily how the resources can be used. We've been using this model in British Columbia for 10 years. We've been offering government funding to institutions and faculty to develop materials on the condition that anything they develop will become openly licensed for others to use. At the present time, over $12 million actually has been given to faculty, and you can see that it's produced over 153 grants, participation across the complete British Columbia post-secondary system, 25 universities, lots of partnerships, 47 credentials based on open resources have been developed, 355 courses, all available for reuse and repurposing. It's been a massive undertaking, but it allows all of those resources to live in a common repository that is accessible to the entire post-secondary population. And it's not a surprise that the kinds of materials that end up being the most popular are the materials that use today's technologies most effectively. If you're in a professional chef program, why not watch the executive chef from Chateau Whistler teach a lesson on how to saute? Those are the kinds of resources that are extremely popular, mobile aware, and can do the things that instructors and course designers want to do. When they're free and open, you can repurpose them in any way. More recently, we decided to go directly to faculty on a much larger scale through an open textbook program. An open textbook is like a conventional textbook, except that all of it is available for customization, localization, translation, repurposing in any way. They come from many places. Many governments, many institutions have made investments in open resources. And it's sometimes hard to find the place where all this information lives in one place. But here's a selection of organizations, foundations, granting and funding agencies that have funded the use of open textbooks. They are of high quality. They are of immediate application in many courses. And the group that is finding the most comfort in the notion of open textbooks is students. And the student movement around pushing forward the notion of open textbooks is growing by the day. The first editorial in the Simon Fraser University student newspaper this fall was, "Sign our petition for open textbooks for Simon Fraser University." They have 3,000 signatures in the first week, and they are sending out a pledge to faculty members that they will ask them to sign. If you will sign this pledge, will you please recommend an open textbook next time you offer this course? Wait till that catches on across campuses across Canada, and wait till you see how things change. One immediate change: students are now looking to see which section of the course they will register in because it comes with an open textbook. Why would I take that section with a $250 textbook if I can take the same course with an open textbook? Really interesting dynamics starting to happen. Our government decided that it would provide funding for 40 open textbooks for the highest enrolled first and second year courses in British Columbia post-secondary institutions. We currently have 61 available textbooks. We've even gone beyond the 40 and have 61 available at the moment. It wasn't a surprise that most of the courses that had the highest enrollments were at the biggest institutions, the University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser University. But making those 40 textbooks available and coming up with a program where faculty could have direct input into the selection of those textbooks was the critical factor in moving the program ahead. The first 40 was so successful that government has just put more money up to say, we'd like to do the same thing, but with skills and vocational programs. Can we go there next? Very interesting move. We've built our whole open textbook program around faculty engagement. We pay faculty to review available open textbooks. We pay faculty to adapt and modify open textbooks for use. Where no open textbook exists in a course or program, we pay them to create from scratch. So there are 3 entry points for faculty. I can be a reviewer and be paid. I can be an adapter and be paid. I can be a creator and be paid. It's different from the publisher model, where you get a little bit of money up front and a royalty. In our model, you get all the money up front. Faculty like that idea. Why is this project happening? It's really about access. It's really about providing access to materials that help ensure student success. When you look at the research that's been done in a number of institutions about student success, some of the success measures deal with the access to the resources. Students make bad choices about resources. They'd rather pay for food and accommodation before books. Big surprise. Those are some of the reasons that we have moved forward in this area. Typically, students spend about $1,200 a year on textbooks. That's 4 times the rate of inflation over the past 20 years. And 70% of students have not purchased a textbook for a course because of the price. They either hedge their bets. They're not going to use this textbook as much as they predict. They wait until second or third week in the course to see whether they're going to stick it out and then buy the textbook. There are a lot of different reasons for why students make those choices. This is research done by student public interest research groups in the US. Student unions, student societies across Canada are writing editorials all the time about an open textbook policy. This is the University of Saskatchewan student newspaper. Similar editorials from the University of Alberta, Simon Fraser University, and other universities and colleges in the West. The idea is catching on with students. Students are also taking measures on their own, setting up booths at orientation weeks, showing their colleagues and classmates how to find free materials on the web so they don't have to pay for a textbook. They're already active doing this without our intervention, so why not help them? Our open textbook program has 3 phases in British Columbia. The initial phase was the review phase, and then we moved into an adoption adaptation phase and are currently in the creation phase right now, where some brand new open textbooks are underway. But the early results are promising. This is a typical example, a class with 60 students taking physics, where the previous textbook cost $187. The instructor, faculty member in this case, decided to use one of the OpenStax College physics textbooks, which he customized the chapters for himself using a system that we've built for editing open textbooks, and that was free. The students can buy the book if they want it in print for $15, or they can download it to an iPad, computer, or any other mobile device. We have them available in all formats. To date, he's saved $11,200 in one section of the course. I checked yesterday, he's run the course 4 times. The savings are now up closer to $60,000 for students taking that course. Multiply that across hundreds, thousands of faculty members and courses, and you begin to see the economic reality of open textbook programs. But it's more than just a good deal. Much more than just a good deal. When you look at the statistics for student success, as I mentioned earlier, you begin to see some interesting stuff. This is data from Florida, where Florida did a study, and these are some of the results. 60% of students don't purchase a textbook at some point due to cost. 35% take fewer courses due to textbook cost. 31% choose not to register in a course due to textbook cost. You get the picture. Students offer all kinds of reasons why they don't use the primary material assigned to the course. You can see them. The biggest gain, however, are the gains for faculty and students in the learning experience realm. And access to customized resources actually improves learning. And they've demonstrated this in a number of studies in US institutions to date. When you take a resource customize it and localize it for your community and its reality, either regionally or even sometimes locally, you begin to see big improvements. The examples are much more relevant. The outcomes are clearer. All of these kinds of initiatives begin to pull together better outcome data when you start to use localized and customized resources. Lots of different subject areas are doing this. This is a psychology textbook, and you can see the results. Students scored higher on departmental final exams based on a textbook that felt more relevant to them because the instructor had put his or her own examples to use in the text. It became a much more engaging learning resource. Lots of opportunity for authentic learning activities. One of the best examples is ChemWiki at the University of California, Davis. It's not only a course in chemistry about knowledge transmission about chemistry, it's about cooperative development of curriculum using students to build the course materials in a wiki-based format that's free and open for anyone to use. These kinds of cooperative, action-based activities with students using open resources are another way of contributing to more authentic and more successful learning experiences. The University of British Columbia has a Faculty of Land and Food Sciences, and they have a huge soil science program that is used by students in many different disciplines at the University of British Columbia, everything from agriculture to forestry to ecology to environmental technology. They have made all of their resources, videos and materials, free and open, not based on simply a teaching model, but they have a research network that's Canada-wide that contributes to the building of the resources. So it is related not only to the teaching needs of faculty, but it also is a part of their research network. They're now extending that even further by building an application called SoilX. That's a mobile application that students use in programs across Canada, in fact, around the world, to contribute more data to their databases through a mobile application which they make accessible to everyone. It's about research, it's about teaching, and it's also about service to the larger community. It's much more than simply a free resource. Collegial collaboration is a big part of what drives faculty to work in research networks. So you find collections of mathematicians building mathematics textbooks in niche mathematics areas. And because these are niche areas, it has no big publisher imperative to make thousands or millions of dollars, so they license these materials in an open manner and share them with their colleagues and their students. English teachers are doing the same thing in different ways, bringing together collections of digital resources in the humanities in very select and niche areas and making them freely available. It's about collegial collaboration, much more than simply a free resource. The next big wave, and this is what MOOCs tend to do, is demonstrate the service mission of universities. We have many faculty members with extraordinary expertise who would like to share that with the world. That's one of the big imperatives of MOOCs. But what if you flip that around slightly and you said to students, out there on the web, there are thousands of open resources that are built for courses that are credentialed at many institutions. What if you think about studying those resources and getting yourself to a level that you believe you have achieved some mastery in that course, and then you bring it to a network of institutions worldwide, the Open Educational Resource University Network, and ask them to credential and credit your learning through prior learning assessment or challenge exams. There are 35 universities worldwide who are part of the OERU network, including Athabasca in Canada, Thompson Rivers University in Canada, the Open University of the United Kingdom, the University of South Africa, many Australian and New Zealand universities are all part of OERU. This is the MOOC for credit based on open educational resources and self-study. It is brand new. It was announced last October at this time and is about to go into operation. OERU.org. That's the service mission of the universities writ large on a worldwide scale. Self-study with credit. That's what people are looking for. So there are 5 things I talked about in the context of open and free. Faculty have full legal control to customize and localize resources to suit the needs of their students. Improved learning through customization and localization. Opportunities for authentic learning. It's not just about knowledge transmission, it's about knowledge construction. Collegial collaboration. Build your research network based on an open platform and an open ethic. Demonstrate the service mission of your organization through providing truly open resources. The singular ethic of the open movement is don't reinvent it. If it already exists, use it or customize it to suit your needs and build it further and make it available to more people. Don't reinvent it. But you have to be aware these days that there are sharks in open waters, primarily publishers who like to use the word open when it isn't really open. The term is open washing, like greenwashing. When something is environmentally friendly and it isn't, look out for open washing. This is a term coined by Audrey Waters, and it has to do with a lot of new publishing schemes that look free or look open but aren't. They're either short-term rentals, hidden costs, or other things that enter into the equation that detract from the full open ride. My take-home messages are 3. Openness is not a new idea. It is not just about an economic model. It's a cultural movement. It's a way of thinking, a way of moving forward in the education space that invites others to participate with you and that the products of your effort will be shared. It's social. It's fundamentally a human right if we believe that in that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and even if we believe as taxpayers that I've already paid for that resource in my province and my government has paid for it, I paid for one, I get one. Open and free. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes.
Are we on? Yeah. Hi, my name's Adam Brown. I'm a professor in biology here at the University of Ottawa. I appreciated some of your biological examples. I'm obviously interested in this idea of openness, since I'm here for one, and I understand the idea of openness in terms of materials and the cost reduction and accessibility for students. But from my perspective as a professor, and I don't think it's unique to biology, but I like to think that we, our experience as professors and the interaction with students is a big part of the whole student experience. And I realize this may not be your expertise, but I'm wondering how what you're offering in terms of openness in materials acts as a complement to the experience based on the interaction with the professor, which is really my main hesitation to diving head on into this whole process, is losing that contact and losing the ability to inspire through presence and interaction.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to detract from the inspiring through practice. And I think some of the most memorable experiences we had in the university was an instructor or lecturer who was charismatic and captivating of our attention as much as the materials that he or she used. But I think there are ways that many professors are experimenting with that brings students into the sort of knowledge construction domain as a partner as much as a student-professor relationship. And the University of California, Davis ChemWiki example is just one of those ways, as is the Soil Science Initiative at UBC, where students are not only participants in those classes, they're also contributors to the collection of knowledge that becomes part of the field of study. And I think that there are opportunities to do those things, perhaps not as much in first and second year entry-level courses, but perhaps in third and fourth, and as students move into graduate studies. So I think there are opportunities for students to participate with faculty in an interactive way, and it often involves building something together and collaboratively that's free and open for others to use. Just as an example, I teach at the University of British Columbia. Our master's program in educational technology happens on the open internet. We don't do it in a closed learning management system. We do it on WordPress, so the whole world can see it. Everything that the students build becomes part of the legacy for the next class coming along. It's like a library of past practice that they can draw upon, improve, or enhance in some way. So it's very much a constructivist model based on being completely open, both with the resources and with the practice. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, David. So it is a cultural shift, and I'm wondering, it's kind of corollary to Adam's question. There are profs who hesitate to share in a way that it is their work, and hence the concerns around retaining control of those things and holding on quite firmly to those. How do you address that in the context of this openness, and what kind of strategies do you use in the university to try to shift that kind of cultural way of thinking?
Well, I think we tend to go with the volunteers, the people who believe that this cultural shift could be meaningful for their teaching practice or for the lives of their students. And those are the people who tend to move closer to the open practice movement. It's clearly not a 100% solution at the moment. It's more like a 10% solution. And so working with the people who have some belief that the model can work for them is really a good way forward. I mean, I've always found that the things that motivate instructors are, is this good for my students? And is this good for me? If you can answer those two questions, most people will play along. And to date, we've found that many instructors, in fact, hundreds, are becoming more engaged with the notion of trying things in a new way. And the benefit accrues to their reputation, as the University of British Columbia Soil Science example shows. They've won teaching awards, research awards, community service awards. It accrues to their tenure application as well. So there are ways of making this work. Uh-oh, Christian, this is going to be tough.
Oh, come on. I really like the presentations and how you built it, and we can see the kind of things you did at BC campus emerge in there. I see how you structure the creation of the open textbooks. No, there's a business model for the faculty members participating in it. So there's a certain number of resources now available. Now, if you want to scale up, you've got 10, 15 universities that are now openly open textbooks. How now you have what 70 advocates that you're creating this morning. What should be done to build the culture shift within the organization so that at one point, all of our universities will sign that open textbook charter and bring our community to use the open textbooks, which is the first piece in order to become producer? What's your advice on this? What should we do for the movement?
Well, I think there are many things that have to happen simultaneously. I think advocacy is a big part of the process. So doing advocacy workshops, and we do them all the time, over and over, advocacy workshops on university campuses. We also bring to the fore exemplars of practice, professors and faculty members in institutions, including the ones that we speak at, that have already gone down this trail. And the secret there is not for us to tell the story, but for them to tell the story through their voice. The other is to provide convivial tools that make it easy to do what we're advocating, because otherwise the pain for gain threshold is too high. And so we've actively built a platform that allows faculty to bring in an open textbook they've found, modify it, customize it, reorder it in any way they want, and then output it. So it can be a low-cost print job, or it can be on an EPUB format, or it can be sent to a Kindle or any other kind of device. So when you have that kind of flexibility, then you're building the notion of efficacy within faculty that I can do this, it works, it's not too painful for me to do it, and by the way, my students like it. The more powerful way to get to faculty, though, is to show them how to build reputation professionally and as researchers through these practices. And we've tried very hard to work with advocates in that side as well. The government of Alberta is working closely with the government of British Columbia, and same with Saskatchewan. We've talked to both Western provinces, and their notion is, we don't want to replicate what you've done, we want to add to the collection you've already built. So if we've already got 60 textbooks, and the government of Alberta wants to build 10 more, and Saskatchewan 10 more, then we're getting up there near 80. And by the way, textbook for me is simply code for a new resource that's open and flexible. But because textbook is a simple metaphor to explain things, particularly to government who give you funding, it works. But I don't see it as a static thing. I like to see it as a much more dynamic thing. But we need first to get buy-in.
Do you have a toolkit for us to use?
Yes, in fact, it was built right here in Ottawa. It is a WordPress system called Pressbooks, and we have added to it an open textbook plugin through the open source community that's called Pressbooks Textbook. It used to be an authoring system for small-time publishers that was built here in Ottawa. Cool, eh?
Very interesting, but one problem is not only resources, but to maintain or to keep resources to be lively.
Yes.
That's a question of communities, of humans.
Yes.
And it's a difficult question. And the other question is a continuous process of improvement of resources connected to all these people.
Yes.
And we have not a good solution for the moment for that.
Well, let me give you two examples, two counter examples. We needed an open geography textbook for British Columbia, and we decided we couldn't find one in the open community. So we organized a week-long textbook sprint where we brought together 8 faculty members, instructional designers, graphic artists, and librarians to the University of British Columbia for a week, and they wrote a Canadian geography textbook in a week, an open geography textbook. At the same time, that built a community of faculty members who will now talk to one another and consider improvements. And while we were doing that, we were tweeting it ongoing throughout the day. And so the British Columbia Ministry of Environment said, hey, we've got some online maps you guys could use. And they started sending us links to things we could include. 10 psychology professors got together in July and decided they needed an open psychology test bank. And so they got together and built a 1,000 item test bank together as a community in a text bank sprint. So it's the notion of getting people together who talk to one another, who eat together, drink together, do all those things as part of a community and build something. It's a new way of thinking about agile development.
Other questions, observations? Okay. We're going to take another 10, 15-minute break, and then we'll be back with one more speaker.
Thanks.